Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the weekly armchair kickoff and a future of football special. And as you can see, I am delighted to say that I am joined by, a friend of the channel, I would say. He's been on regular shows throughout, and he's all-round good guy. He's a former Manchester United striker, Phil Marsh. Phil, how are you, sir?
Yeah, all good, thanks. Good to be back on. I've not been on for quite a while now, so I know.
Yeah, I was going to say we haven't been on together for. It's definitely not been this season, that's for sure.
Yeah, it has been a while. I've just been really busy with various different things, but good to be back on. As I say, I'd spoke to Keane a few times about coming on, and just one thing or another couldn't make it. But yeah, good to be finally back on, and hopefully we'll have a good catch up and speak about the news from today.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I was saying to Phil backstage that obviously I had a perfect show written, and then obviously we'll start there actually. So we're going to react a little bit to the breaking news today, and if you haven't heard already, you probably would have. But so obviously Ten Hag has been sacked by Manchester United. From my point of view, I'll say quickly, it seemed like it was inevitable. It seemed like it was a long time coming. I probably sort of lost confidence with him a little bit after the Tottenham game. The 3-0 defeat at home was quite a bitter pill to swallow. I don't think the red card had anything really to do about it. But what was sort of your reaction to it? Do you think it was like considering the start to the season, do you think it was like a correct decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, a lot of fans would have had the same sort of feeling this morning that, the results this season and the performances have been so underwhelming that, I think he probably knew that he was going to be in trouble, and it was just inevitable, really, of sort of not, if it was when. I think, obviously, the result yesterday, was probably the final nail in the coffin. But I just feel as though, in terms of if you weigh up his time at the club from the very start to sort of where we are today, we've sort of regressed quite a lot, and there's not been really much progression. Other than obviously, we've had some really good performances here and there throughout that time, and obviously he's won a couple of trophies, which is, you sort of can thank him for that in terms of sort of bringing some silverware in. But overall, when you look at the sort of bigger picture in terms of the amount of money he's spent, the style of football that we're playing at the moment, and sort of the results, they've just not been good enough. So unfortunately for him, I think, he's just not been able to sort of get it going. But again, I do feel for him a little bit in terms of this kind of thing has happened sort of, numerous times now, and some of these players have sort of been around, where, managers have come and gone, and sort of sometimes you've got to sort of look at, is the root problem, not necessarily always the manager's fault. Players have got to start taking accountability. And I seen something Roy Keane put on today on Instagram, which is it sums it up perfectly. I think, some of the players have got to want got to want it more and have more of a say in terms of like leading by example and sort of managing the dressing room themselves. I think obviously when I was at the club, that was just a given, and obviously we had Sir Alex Ferguson, the greatest manager, which helps. But not only that, we had players and characters in the dressing room that demanded high standards every single day at training, every single game, every single minute of the day, whatever it was. Professionalism, desire, right attitude, and I think we're sort of miles away from that in terms of where we're at currently as a club on and off the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely echo everything you've just said. I couldn't agree more. So moving on a little bit. So we know that Ruven Nistelrooy is going to take over as interim boss. I believe you might have shared a dressing room with him once or twice in your time. What kind of character was he to sort of be around, and what sort of manager do you think he will be? And will he make any big changes to the role, or will it just be, we're just going to do what we do, or focus on this or focus on that?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously was lucky enough to be at the club around the time when Van Nistelrooy was there, done loads of finishing drills with him, and was lucky enough to train with him quite a bit and sort of share a dressing room at times. And Ruud was a fantastic player, fantastic guy, very driven, very sort of professional in terms of his attitude, and when he was on the training pitch, made sure he was ready for the games and stuff by doing extra. And I think he'll try and implement that with some of the players. But I just think that because of the way the game's gone now, and sort of when you look at these modern players, I think it's really hard to sort of, what's the right way of saying this? I think you need to have that sort of self-drive yourself. Obviously, managers and coaches and all this kind of thing can give you the right information and can sort of try and motivate you as much as they can. But I think a lot of it comes down to the player and being able to sort of motivate yourself and expect more and demand high standards. Ruud will certainly try and do that because obviously he came through at the time when the club was at its peak and had players that would demand that. So I'm hoping that Ruud can sort of rub off on quite a few of the players in terms of that and just try and help out in that respect. The style of football will certainly change, and I think it'll be a little bit more attack-minded. And I think for Ruud, obviously, when he was in the team, he used to thrive off balls coming into the box and sort of, getting on the end of things in and around the area. At the moment, when you look at our current squad, we sort of, we haven't got that real poacher in terms of somebody who score a lot of goals, just getting on the end of things and just being a natural finisher. I think Ruud obviously will want to try and hopefully, bring players in who I think, because, you look at our current squad and sort of where we're sort of really lacking. And I think the goal scoring end of things is massively where we need to improve. I think, we've brought in quite a number of players in the last couple of seasons to try and help bolster that goal scoring problem that we've had. And it's not really worked out. I think Ruud will be very keen to get somebody in who can sort of do that and give us that extra bit of cutting edge in the final third. I think for him, he thrived on that as a player, and I'm sure as a manager he'll want to play an attacking style of football that Man United fans expect and that we want to see. We've sort of not seen that now for a long time, and I think the new manager that comes in, or obviously, Ruud in the interim time, will want to try and, get the spectators excited about going to Old Trafford and watching a good brand of football. And then hopefully, the results will come with that. But I think obviously in terms of where we're at with the squad, that is going to take time, because we definitely need to add some more quality players and get players in the club that understand what it means to play for Manchester United and sort of, go out with that attitude and desire that you sort of need to have to play at the top level.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And Ruud, like, he was my hero growing up. He made me fall in love with Man United straight away. Like I remember I went to Portugal on holiday one year with my parents and my family. I was probably only 5 or 6 years old, and the taxi that picked us up from the airport to take us to our hotel had a Ruud van Nistelrooy air freshener. And I pointed out to my dad, and the taxi driver actually gave it to me. I've probably still got it in like a memory box somewhere. But yeah, ever since, like, just watching him as a kid, and like when I've like first few games I ever saw, it was just, he's just a mesmerising player to watch. Absolutely. Yeah. And as we understand it, Manchester United are in advanced talks to Ruben Amorim of Sporting Lisbon. It is believed that he has about an £8.3 million release clause in his contract. And also, apparently, I heard just before we came on air that Dave Brailsford actually went to Portugal last week and met with Ruben to see if he would be interested. So what are your initial thoughts on him per se? And he's actually quite a manager in demand, because obviously there was heavy links with him with Liverpool in the summer, and there was potential of him going to Chelsea before Maresca. And he was also a contender for the City job when Pep decides to leave. So what's your sort of thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, in terms of the guy and the manager himself, I probably wouldn't be able to comment too much, know that much about him, as probably a lot of fans don't really, in terms of, being in Lisbon. I think, from his reputation and obviously the interest that he's had, he's obviously an up-and-coming manager that's got, a lot of buzz around him. So I think this next appointment that we make has got to be, the right fit for the club, and somebody who's going to be able to come in and sort of tick all the boxes, really, because I think this time now that we're in is sort of make or break. I think we've sort of, skirted around the edges for too long as a club, on and off the pitch. I think this now is sort of the time where, these next few decisions and sort of, appointments, if you like, within the club and the recruitment need to be spot on, because I think, as a club, we sort of, can't be in a worse place in terms of a league position. I think, the results have been really poor. The performances have been awful. The players' performances, have been, average at best. We've just sort of, been really flat this year. And I think this next decision in terms of who comes into the club, has got to be, the right fit and sort of come in and try and lift everything. The fan base need lifting, the players obviously need lifting, the performances need to improve. And yeah, I mean, this guy's obviously got a good reputation. I've heard some sort of comparisons is going to be the next Pep Guardiola and stuff like that. So, if this is the kind of stuff that's getting banded around with him, then fair enough, and hopefully the club have seen enough in him that they like what they've seen and they think that he can come in and deliver the goods. I'm willing to give him a chance. As I said, I can't really comment too much because I don't know enough about him. But yeah, it's a massive decision, and I think, as I say, this appointment now has got to be the right one, because I think as a club and as a fan base, we've been through enough, and we deserve a lot better, really, on and off the pitch, and sort of I'm hoping that this is the right time now to sort of start building and kick on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Brian in the comments there. Evening, Brian. Ineos not hanging around, a chance to get their man in now. Have to get this appointment right. Absolutely agree. Evening to you, Keen. Glad to see you watching, mate. And yeah, it's for me, it's a breath of fresh air really to see that they're going for a manager that's not this sort of star-studded, trophy-winning like animal like we've been used to with sort of like Jose and Louis van Gaal, like managers of sort of that ilk. It's quite nice to see that they're finding a manager that's up and coming. He's applying his trade elsewhere, and actually he is quite highly regarded. So it is a breath of fresh air for me. And like you say, it would just be nice to get a manager in that will be able to cement their own sort of philosophies and get it right, rather than just sort of the hell we've been through the last few years.
Yeah, no, right. I agree totally with that, and I think just quickly to touch on, I think in terms of a manager now that not really many people know a lot about, I think that will help, because you won't get sort of branded straight away, and this guy obviously will have his own plans, his own ideas, and I'm hoping it'll just be as you say, like a full reset and sort of come in with a proper brand of football. I think you'll agree, obviously, when you go watching Man United at the moment, you never know what kind of performance we're going to expect. Don't know what kind of style of play we're going to play with, what formation, what players are going to be playing. And I think, we've lost our identity in terms of like as a club and as a team over, the course of the last couple of seasons. So I'm hoping that this new manager will come in and sort of, cement that straight away, and at least the fans will, sort of know what to expect. You can understand dips in players' performances and sort of, the odd bad result, but I just want to see, an identity within the way that we're trying to play and sort of, try and understand and sort of resonate with a Manchester United team that we've been used to over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Realistic, then, what's your ambition for the club coming, like, because obviously we're 14th now with potentially a new manager in the next, could be weeks, could be a month or so. Where realistically could United finish, and if any trophies do you think?
Yeah, I think, to be fair, mate, from the start that we've had, it's going to be very tough this year to sort of finish in the top four, which would have been obviously the aim at the start of the season. I think that is going to be very difficult now. I think, you've got to sort of still try and aim for a Europe place. So maybe, 6th, 5th place would be, achievable at the moment with where we are. In terms of a trophy, I just don't see it this year. I just think, last couple of seasons we've done well with picking up trophies in terms of the FA Cup and the Carabao. But I think this year, I just think with everything that's been going on and sort of the players in terms of the performances and the sort of confidence levels that you can see, unless a new manager can come in and sort of really hit the ground running and get players, running through brick walls and sort of having that, real desire and passion. For me, I just can't see, United doing anything this year. I think it's just going to be a really sort of, poor year really in terms of like for the club, because as a club we want to be challenging for trophies, and we've not done that in terms of the Premier League for a long while. But I just can't see it this year for some reason. I've not seen enough from some of the players that sort of makes me believe that we can do anything this year. I just think it's been that bad. Don't know about you. That's just how I feel.
No, I completely agree. And part of me sort of thinks, and this might upset quite a lot of United fans, but I don't really care. Part of me thinks if we finished outside of the top sort of European places and didn't win anything, it wouldn't fuss me this year. If it just gave, for example, if it is Amorim that takes over full time, it just gives him a year just to sort of get his feet in, sort of start applying his philosophies, and then you just go, right, next year, bang, like you start going firing all cylinders. A year without Europe doesn't fuss me at all. I'd rather, if it was going to be any, you'd want it to be the Champions League because that's where the best play. I'm not overly fussed about the Europa or the conference, but yeah, it wouldn't fuss me at all. I don't know how you feel if it was just a year without Europe and just focus on domestics in the league.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think in terms of if you could sort of look into the future and say, this year we finish mid-table and we don't do anything in Europe and sort of, for next season, that gives us the opportunity to just concentrate solely on the league and sort of have that bit of time where the new manager can come in and sort of implement his style, then, that'd be great. Obviously, as a club, the expectation is that, you try and win every game and you challenge him for trophies. So, some of the fan base wouldn't, sort of be very happy with that. But I get what you're saying. And obviously, a little bit of pain in the short term for sort of hopefully a bit of, success in the long term would definitely be more beneficial. But again, I don't know. You just have to see. And I think obviously the new manager will want to sort of come in and sort of, have a look at some players. I think sort of for me, some of these players are going to be on, thin ice with the new manager. I think, they'll, maybe only get a couple of opportunities. And I'm hoping that, this new manager is quite cutthroat. And if there's players that aren't producing or pulling the weight or their attitude's not right, then, they need to go and we need to get players through the door that are going to, represent the club in the right way and sort of fight for every single ball, be professional on and off the pitch, make sure you're helping in terms of like, leading by example for some of these younger players that are looking up to some of the senior pros. Because at the moment, it just feels to me as though, everybody's sort of going through the motions. It's not really sort of, seeming to me as though it's hurting the players that were in this current position, which, shouldn't be happening. If this happened in the era I was at the club, it'd be, it just wouldn't happen because the standards were so high. The sort of dressing room sort of managed itself. The demands that the players put on themselves every single day in training. You go through bad spells. Everyone goes through bad spells. You have bad results, but it's how you react. And I think this dressing room's too nice and too soft and doesn't have enough leaders that can sort of, pick everybody back up and sort of, take the ball by the arms. I think we're sort of, a million miles away from that really at the moment, which is not a good place to be in.
No, absolutely. And we'll move on to that actually, if you don't mind. We're going to actually talk about you a little bit now and sort of move away from the United news today, because I think a lot of outlets are sort of covering it and I think we've definitely had our piece on it. So we're going to talk about you now, mate. And the whole reason we got you on is to talk about you. So there we are. No better place to start really than the beginning. So let's talk about your time in the United Academy, and you talk about demands and sort of like expectations. Was it drilled into you like exactly how important like academy talent was to the club, and was that sort of demands fed to you at that sort of young age coming through the setup?
Yeah, I think I joined the club at the age of 11. So I mean, from the moment I joined the club, the sort of the standards of the club and the expectations that were sort of put on you was massive. But, I was sort of somebody who relished that and really enjoyed being around that, working with some of the best coaches and sort of, representing the club on and off the pitch, making it known about the history of the club and what it means to play for Manchester United. All this kind of stuff was sort of drilled into you straight away. from a young age. And you sort of knew how lucky that you was and fortunate to be in that position, and you didn't take anything for granted, which was brilliant for me. Kept you sort of on the straight and narrow. You never sort of got ahead of yourselves. Coaches always keeping you on your toes and making sure that you maintain the standards. And yeah, as I say, it was brilliant. I absolutely loved my time coming through the academy. Playing with some great players, working with some of the best coaches, and being lucky enough to sort of travel and go abroad and play against different countries against different teams. And it was amazing. And as I say, that then obviously stands you in good stead for sort of when you leave school and you go into the full time and sort of sign your sort of YTS, and then you sort of know what to expect, and then it just obviously from that point it gets ramped up even more then, because you're training every day, you're full time, you sort of mixing with the first team players and the professional players. And yeah, it was just unbelievable for me to sort of be at the club for such a long time. I was there for 10 years, obviously from the age of 11 to 21. So to go through the academy, then the youth team, and then into the reserves, and obviously, to be involved in the first team for, the last sort of year and a half was unbelievable.
Yeah, even just to be around some of the players that you were with. Just for the viewers, I asked Phil if he wouldn't mind talking about the next subject very quickly, and he said absolutely fine. So I just wanted to take you back to January 14th, 2004. Now, the night before, I believe you played for United in an FA Youth Cup game against Man City, of all teams, as far as I can remember, which must have been a dream come true for any United fan, just to play at Old Trafford. So first of all, why don't you tell us about that game in particular, and then in your own words, sort of what happened the day after?
Yeah, so that was obviously the Youth Cup. Yeah, so we played Man City in the Youth Cup at Old Trafford. I was obviously only 17 at this point, so it was sort of I was sort of in the younger category age group, so I was playing a year up. But I came on in the game and sort of set one of the goals up. I think we won the game 2-1. So absolutely amazing experience, as you say, to come on and play at Old Trafford in front of a big crowd, and obviously against your local rivals to win the game was unbelievable. And then, yeah, sort of the day after, we was asked to go in for a cool down, which was sort of, standard procedure for sort of, big games like that. So we just went in and did a cool down the day after, which usually sort of was, a bit on the bikes, maybe a bit of swimming, a little bit of work with the physios, and then a bit of gym work, whatever. But at this point, because I was only 17, we used to go to college as well. So we used to do 2 days college so when you leave school, obviously you sort of sign your YTS. We used to do 2 years at college, which was at Ashton-on-Mersey School. So I used to do sports science and psychology, and we used to do our coaching badge. So you level 1 and 2. So after we'd done our cool down, some of the lads was asked to sort of catch up with some of the schoolwork that they'd been behind on. Now, this was probably unlucky sort of for me with obviously what happened after, but I was sort of up to date probably for the first time with all my work. So I asked if it would be okay to go on with one of the older players who I used to stay in digs with, because as a first year YT, we used to get picked up on a minibus. There'd been a ban on first year YTs driving cars because Jimmy Davis had died. I think maybe 12 months before I signed. So the boss had just made a decision to say that, you can only drive your car into the training ground when you turn 18. And there was no sort of, sharing cars, if you like, with some of the younger players, unless it was exceptional circumstances. So this particular day, I'd obviously been up to date with all my work, and I was sharing digs with one of the older players. Now, I asked, because obviously I'd have been waiting around for a couple of hours for the minibus to take me home, because the other lads hadn't finished. There was a couple of us that asked if we could get a lift with some of the lads that we were staying in digs with. And I think probably because we won the game the day before in the Youth Cup, and it was only round the corner really from the training ground. This particular day, they let us go on with some of the older lads, and then this obviously was, in hindsight, obviously for me, probably one of the worst decisions that I've ever made. So we left the training ground, and as we left the training ground, I was travelling I was passenger in a car with one of my friends going back to the digs in Sale, which, as I say, was only a 5-minute drive from Carrington. And as he left the training ground, outside Carrington is like a long, wide road, and young players with fast cars and sort of being a bit naive was sort of setting the scene for you. And one of the other reserve team players just shot past Callum, the lad who I was in the car with, and I think because obviously he had a fast car as well, he sort of flew after him, a little bit of cat and mouse, and then as you leave the training ground and you turn right going past Man City's old training ground, the sort of roads are quite snaky and sort of, tight bends and stuff. And it was just one of them things. I think he's sort of gone to go around the corner and chase after the lad in the car. And I think he sort of backed out. And as he went around the corner, the back of the car just spun out. And I just remember looking and sort of seeing the car spin out and seeing the other car in the opposite lane heading towards me.
Mm.
That was sort of the last thing I remember. Just remember shutting my eyes and sort of remembering feeling and hearing the smash, and then that was it. Just complete blackout. Didn't wake up for sort of probably half an hour, 40 minutes. And when I did wake up and eventually come round, I was sort of getting cut out of a car at the side of the road by the fire and rescue service, and ended up sort of getting lifted to Wythenshawe Hospital in a helicopter. So yeah, for me it was obviously a traumatic time. My side of the vehicle took all the impact, so I was left with sort of several fractures down the left hand side of my body. Very, very lucky if you get a chance to have a look at the pictures online. And you see the vehicle and the car, you'd probably look at that and say there's no way anyone's coming out of that alive. So very lucky in one hand to sort of, still be alive. But I think, in terms of where I was at with my footballing career and the sort of progression that I was making, it was just a really bad time for me in terms of, what happened and sort of the injuries that I suffered. It was really hard to sort of come back from that. Being a 17-year-old kid who's just left school, playing in the youth cup a year up, being made the captain of the, youth team and making my debut in the reserves sort of not long before that, me sort of trajectory and me sort of performances were sort of, ahead of where I was expecting. And then obviously that happened and it was a massive setback for me. So yeah, really difficult time. And as I say, that obviously kept me sidelined for just over a year. With as I say, all the injuries that I suffered. So it was a real, kick in the teeth moment for me, and obviously a hard road to recovery. But thankfully, after a lot of hard work with the physios and sort of, mental battles with trying to sort of overcome, the sort of, mental side of it with obviously, suffering all the stuff that I sort of had to go through. It was it was worthwhile in the end because I came back and then obviously kicked on again and managed to play in the first team.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you talking about that, mate. I can honestly imagine how much difficult that much time must have been for you. Sir Alex, I mean, you mentioned in an interview that you did before, Sir Alex was right there to offer support to you and your family as well. Must have been so important to you for that, not only as a player of the club, but also just as a fan as well, for someone you look up to.
Yeah, no, as I say, he was magnificent. I think from the moment that it happened, he sort of put my mind at ease in terms of, telling me that he would give me an extra year on my contract because obviously the car accident and the incident wasn't my fault. He made sure I got the best treatment. He came and visited me at my home in St. Helens at my mum and dad's house when I was sort of, come back from hospital, and I was sort of, bed in the bed in the front room at my mum and dad's house. He came and visited and just had a conversation with me to sort of say that, not to worry and that you'll be back. And as I say, he didn't have to do that, but I think he sort of made it his business to sort of try and, make me feel like that everyone was sort of backing behind me and rooting for me to sort of, get back. Because I think at the time, as I say, I was doing really well. I was playing a year above. There was only 3 of us that actually got kept on and given a sort of full-time contract in my age group. So yeah, it was difficult because I say, when I look back at that time, as I say, I was sort of heading in a really good direction, and that was a massive sort of setback, and sort of to be on the sidelines for so long, not only are you missing out on the football, but obviously all the other players are sort of, taking over you because, they're getting the opportunities, they're getting the chances, and they're training every day, and sort of you're not being able to do that. So obviously when I came back, I was playing catch up straight away from that moment on. But not only that, obviously I was, a little bit apprehensive because of the amount of injuries that I suffered, going into tackles. It was a little bit, and as I say, it was a lot of the sort of mental side of it as well, because of, all the things that I'd gone through, and sort of the sort of pain and sort of suffering that I had to do to get myself back to any sort of level where I felt like I was going to be able to contribute and be part of the team. So yeah, it was a lot of self-doubt, but thankfully I had a lot of good people around me to help me through that. And yeah, as I say, I'm glad that I did it. And as I say, I managed to eventually, it wasn't straightforward by any stretch. I think, it took me a long while to sort of get back to a level and a standard where I felt, part of the team, and that I was, performing well enough to sort of represent the club, if you like. But yeah, as I say, I got there in the end, and, did really well to sort of, get back to that level where, I was given a chance to play in the first team, which was, unbelievable and massive honour, because, a lot of people around that time, it was really difficult to even get, anywhere near the first team, because the standard and the group and the players were so good. Every week I was playing in the reserves, and I was playing up front with Louis Saha or Ole Gunnar Solskjaer or Alan Smith or David Bellion, and these players are all trying to get in the first team, but couldn't. So, that was the kind of caliber of player that you sort of trying to compete against. So, for me to be able to, get an opportunity to play in the first team and being around that, squad at the time was unbelievable.
No, absolutely. And like I say, it led up to you after intense rehab, I can imagine, and recovery. It led up to you making your United debut in the League Cup against Crewe Alexandra. Tell me about that day in particular, and when you heard that you were starting the match, like, what was your emotions like after such a traumatic experience getting to that stage?
Yeah, I mean, it was brilliant. I think, obviously, as a reserve team player, predominantly, you sort of always looking at them Carabao Cup games and thinking, that might be my opportunity to maybe get a sniff and, maybe get an opportunity to be involved. Obviously, to start the game would never have been, something that I would have envisioned at the time. But just to maybe get involved in the squad. And I think, it was actually Carlos Queiroz that told me I was going to be starting the game, and Mick Phelan after training. So I'd been training with the squad for that week when it was the Carabao Cup. So I'd done a couple of days training and obviously trained quite well. And sort of prior to that, I'd been doing really well in the reserves. I was scoring goals, and obviously just felt like, I was back in a good place, and that I might be able to, maybe get a nod and maybe be involved in that game. But to obviously then be told I was going to be starting the game with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Alan Smith up front was, something that I sort of, couldn't really sort of fathom at the time. It was just incredible. And then obviously excited and sort of, a little bit nervous at the same time. But yeah, brilliant day, as I say, the training session. And then when I went home, just to tell your mum and dad and all your friends that you're going to be starting, priceless. Them sort of moments that will sort of stick with you forever. And just sort of the build up then to the game, obviously knowing that you're going to be starting, and, just excitement really. And obviously when you get to the day of the game, it's just a bit of a whirlwind really, because you sort of doing things differently to what you'd normally do. So, meeting at a hotel, having your pre-match, traveling down on a coach, and then obviously like thousands of fans outside the ground, and walking into the changing room and just seeing your shirt hanging up with your name and stuff. Obviously, getting a team talk off the boss, was something that you'll never forget. And yeah, it was just the whole day really was amazing, and being able to capture that moment, if you like, and sort of vividly remember a lot of the things that happened that day, like just standing in the tunnel and hearing the United fans singing and being able to walk out and just it's like makes the hairs on your neck sort of stand up a little bit when you think back to them kind of moments, because as I say, it doesn't happen very often. And for me, it was something that I never really sort of thought would happen after everything that happened with the car crash and the amount of top class players that were at the club at the time. It was something that I didn't really sort of think would ever happen for me. But luckily enough, I sort of worked myself back to a level and sort of must have just caught the boss's eye a little bit. And I think he probably thought with everything that I'd been through, maybe that I probably warranted and deserved that opportunity, maybe to show what I can do. And as I say, I'm thankful for that. And it was something that I'll always sort of look back on very fondly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you lived a dream that so many people would love to do, just to represent Man United in any appearance whatsoever. It's just a dream for so many people. Now, I wouldn't be very good at this if I didn't ask for a story or two from your days in that United dressing room. So me and Keane sort of talked about particular players, and we picked out two. So he picked out CR7, Cristiano, and I picked out the skipper, Roy Keane. So let's talk about Cristiano, and really what in that early stage of his career, what was he like in the dressing room? And did you know straight away, like from murmurings around the training ground, that this guy was going to be, one of the best, if not the best ever?
Yeah, I mean, when he first joined, he was very quiet, very subdued, didn't really sort of speak that much. I think maybe predominantly because he didn't speak much English. So I think he used to sort of hang around a little bit with sort of some of the foreign players, as you would do, obviously coming to a new club and not really speaking much English, and sort of gravitated a little bit, because obviously his age, he sort of gravitated to sort of myself and some of the other younger players who were sort of around his age, because at the time obviously he was only a teenager when he signed. And yeah, you could sort of see his raw ability, his technical, feet, his footwork, and obviously he had all the tricks and the flicks and stuff. And I think, when he first joined, I think he sort of struggled a little bit in terms of to adapt and sort of know when and when to do the tricks and the flicks, and sort of some of his end products wasn't probably as good. And when you've got players like Keane and people like that in the changing room, obviously if you're doing all this kind of stuff and you're not producing, they're going to let you know about it. And I think obviously they did do that, and it sort of took him a little bit of time to adapt. But I think he did a lot of work with Rennie Meulenstein, who I worked with as well a lot in terms of, one-to-one and helping me with some of my recovery. And as a reserve team manager, he took over at the reserves and sort of worked with me. So I know, how good of a coach Rennie was. And I think after Rennie sort of worked with Cristiano and sort of, told him basically that less is more, and sort of, there's times and a place for when you do all the trickery and the footwork, and just to sort of concentrate more on his end product. I think, the difference that we've seen in that sort of second, third season was, phenomenal. And the output that he was getting was just ridiculous. So I think a lot of that comes down to his own mental sort of, state of mind, wanting to be the best, staying behind, doing extra, doing all the stuff in the gym, looking after himself on and off the pitch. That was exactly what he was about from the first minute. I think he came into the club, looked at all the players and seen what their strengths and weaknesses was, and took all their strengths and sort of tried to roll them all into one. And fair play to him, he sort of did everything, didn't leave any stone unturned with work ethic, all that kind of stuff. Would always stay behind and do extra. And yeah, just his competitive nature, he just wanted to be the best at absolutely everything. Like I always tell the story, which you might not have heard. So we used to play a lot of stuff in the gym. So we'd play like basketball, or we'd play, two touch with the football, or we'd do stuff in the gym, or we'd play table tennis. So I was one of the best table tennis players at the club at the time. And a lot of the first team players used to try and sort of take me on and challenge me. And I used to beat the majority of them. Obviously, you'd lose the odd game, but more times than not, I would sort of, win games. And Cristiano, obviously, competitive nature, challenged me. And I beat him quite easily the first few games, which, obviously, he didn't take very well. A couple of weeks later, I hadn't heard anything from him in terms of on the table tennis. Like, we'd still have interactions and stuff. And then he came and found me and just was like, do you want a game of table tennis? So I was like, all right, okay, we'll have a game. But obviously, not knowing, he'd been, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, he'd been away, bought himself a table tennis table at his house.
No way.
I think he must have like hired someone to sort of like coach him or play with him every night. And obviously he came back and he was a completely different player, like unbelievable. Like his standard had just gone through the roof, and he ended up beating me. But that was sort of like the kind of level he would go to just prove that he was like the best, and he hated losing regardless of what it was. So that was the kind of mentality that he had, not just with football, with absolutely anything. And I mean anything. Like you could play a game of anything with him, and he'd be so devastated if you beat him, and he'd really want to sort of like get his own back and prove that he was the best. And I think as we've seen throughout his career, that's the kind of person that he is. And obviously you've got to have ability, and you've got to have all the other things that come with it. But I think that's the kind of person that if you've got that self drive and that mentality to be the best at anything and everything, and you give yourself the best chance by doing all the extra, then he's obviously proven that over the years at Real Madrid, and obviously now he's still going at that age because he's so driven that he wants to keep playing and keep breaking records. And he was an unbelievable player, and as I say, he was great to be around. I think a lot of people have perception of Cristiano Ronaldo maybe being a little bit arrogant, but I think to do what he's done in the game and to sort of be the level that he's at, you've got to have a little bit of that about you, because you can't do some of the stuff and sort of play the way he plays without sort of having that little bit of swagger, and that in the right way. I don't mean walking around acting like you, but you've got to play a little bit with that kind of mentality of, yes, I am the best player now, like, give me the ball and let me show you what I can do. And I think, as I say, he's somebody who's a brilliant role model for young players on and off the pitch. The way he's gone about it. Obviously, he's made mistakes over the years, we know, with certain things, but who hasn't? And I think there's not many better than him to look at in terms of what to do on and off the pitch to get the best out of yourself for the longevity that he's done it in his career.
That's incredible. That table tennis story is absolutely brilliant. I love that. Yeah. Just that competitive nature, just to go out and get yourself your own table and train yourself to beat someone else is brilliant. Let's talk Roy Keane. So obviously you see him as a pundit now, and he has this aura of a man with just such great leadership. And if you're building an all-time Premier League 11, your captain is 9 times out of 10 either going to be Patrick Vieira or Roy Keane. Just how much of a presence did he have around United? And as he was, as the captain of the club, was he like, how do I put it? Was he almost as important as the boss, or was it a case of he knew where he was, sort of thing? Like, was there a general respect towards the captain?
I think Roy Keane was the heartbeat of the club for me. I think he sort of led by example on and off the pitch. He was sort of somebody who, for a young player being in and around him, you used to be intimidated, and not in scared of him in terms of like that he was going to bat you or anything like that. But I think as a young player, you knew that you sort of standards had to be high all the time. And if you stepped out of line, or if you was maybe acting a little bit flash or got ahead of yourself, he would be somebody who would make sure that you was brought back down to reality very quickly. So for me, obviously at the time you might look at that and be a little bit like, oh, he's a, whatever. But because he was such a good role model, and I think he was obviously, looking after the club and sort of having their intentions firmly in his mind at that point and wanting the best. Regardless of whether it was with the first team, it was anyone and everyone. He just expected and demanded that everyone, was singing off the same hymn sheet. And I think, obviously, his performances on the pitch, the sort of way he looked after other players, and yeah, it was just great. And there's a lot of stories I've got with Keano, which I look back on, and obviously in the moment and in the time, you sort of scratching your head a little bit and maybe not agreeing with what he was saying. But then, as time goes on, you sort of look back and sort of fully digest and appreciate some of them moments. You sort of understand when you sort of get older and wiser that, everything he was doing was for the good of the club and sort of, trying to help you as a young player to hopefully get into the first team. So, yeah, as I say, he was brilliant with me. I obviously, when I was in hospital, he was the club captain, so he came and visited me and spoke to me in the hospital. Had a really good chat with him, and just again, as a sort of leader and someone who you'd love to have at the side of you in your team. You'd hate to be playing against him because of what he brings to the table, not just his technical ability, which I think he was, very good and probably underrated because of all the other stuff that he sort of brought to the table. But, he was just really infectious. I think you see some of his performances and, lifting players and he's talking and his demands and, sometimes you sort of might look at him and think he's moaning at you or he's not. But I think some players need that. And I've heard a lot of players come out over the years and say, some players might need an arm round him, but other players might need a bit of a bollocking, and he would give you that, but obviously in the right way to sort of, get you on top of your game. Or if you've made a mistake, come on, you're better than that, lift your game. And I think for me, someone like Roy Keane would be perfect now for, in our team now, we're lacking somebody like that who, would be able to give people a bit of a G up and just to try and sort of lift people and make the demands higher and expect better. I think we're sort of, and I think the game's changed in terms of like, not just people like Roy Keane. I think the game has gone a little bit soft now where, you can't really say stuff to players because they take it the wrong way or they'll start having a moan back and then it affects the performances where, back in the day, everyone would sort of be, that, the expectations were that high that, if you made a little mistake, you'd be getting a bollocking, but you'd understand that, that's because they know you can do better and they demand better. And you just have to take it and crack on and just try and, do something right the next time. But yeah, as I say, Keano was, one of a kind. And I think he was a massive part of the success at the club because he managed the dressing room and he kept all the players, in line. If there was fallouts, which there was a lot of fallouts, it would always get dealt with in the changing room in-house. There would be no stuff going out to the media and, all this kind of stuff, which doesn't help. And obviously nowadays with the social media and all that kind of thing, we've seen loads of, things that have come out in the media which probably shouldn't have. But back in the day when I was there, all that kind of stuff just got squashed and dealt with in the changing room or, in the club. It didn't get leaked out. Everything was dealt with, and then you move on and you just carry on, and that's the way it was. But yeah, I think Keano in this day and age would be brilliant in this current squad because I think a lot of players had sort of learned so much from just seeing somebody who's got the right attitude and mentality to want to succeed.
Yeah, Keane has sent me this comment. I assume there's a story behind that.
Yeah. So that's my best story probably. So
go on.
The wage slip was, so I came out. We used to get paid at the end of a month, and then you'd get your wage slip off Kath at reception. So this particular day, I've came out. I've been training, speaking to Kath on reception. There's a few other lads like knocking around waiting for the wages, and she's just fanning through all these wage slips because obviously you can imagine there's probably like about 100 with all the reserve and youth team players and the first team players. So as she's fanning through, she's just sort of gone to me, "There you are, Phil. Have a nice day, love." So she's given me the slip, and I've not really thought anything of it. Just walked straight out the doors, the glass doors, headed off to my car, got into my car, and I was actually going to the Trafford Centre with one of the lads. So I was like excited to open my wages, see how much I've got paid, and obviously I'm on my way. So as I've opened it, it used to have like 3 little slits that you'd rip, and then obviously like you'd see how much you was getting. Now at this time, obviously I was only in the reserve, so obviously on a decent wage, and you'd get your win bonuses for playing in the reserves and stuff like that, which was decent at the time. I think it was like 180, 200 quid for a win and 90, 100 quid for a draw. So obviously decent. But when I opened the slip and I peeled it back, I seen like there was about 10 or 15 different like sort of transaction payments. So usually for me, I'd only have like 3 or 4, because obviously you'd have your normal salary, you'd have all your like bonuses if you played in the youth cup, whatever. So, and I seen all, and I was like, what? And then I looked, and obviously I knew straight away that it wasn't my wage. I looked down at the net pay, and it was like, wow, this is definitely not mine. It was like 6 figures, like net pay. So I knew straight away that this wasn't my sort of wage. And obviously like Champions League, FA Cup, Premier League, appearance money, all this kind of stuff. So I was like, oh no. So I've sort of pulled it back a little bit further and seen Mr. R. Keane on the wage slip.
Oh shit.
So, and I've literally like wiped 2 sides of the wage slip off, so it's like fully open apart from this like end side. So he'd obviously known that I'd opened it. So I was like dreading it, but obviously I thought, I can't take that home with me. I'll have to go back in and obviously give it a back and try and get my one. So as I'm heading back into the training ground, obviously it's glass doors, and Roy Keane stood waiting at the reception with Kath. And like you can see he's a bit irate because he's probably in a rush. And obviously she can't find his wage slip because I've just opened it, obviously. So as I walk back through the double doors, he just looks at me and sort of like smirks and laughs a little bit. And I'm obviously sweating at this point because I'm thinking, oh my God, this is not going to go down well, when he knows that I've literally just seen how much he's paid. So I've sort of gone over and sort of been stuttering, saying like, "Oh, Kath, I think you've given me the wrong wage slip." And she's gone, "Oh, let's have a look, like, love, let's have a look here," because obviously Keno's getting a bit agitated and like wants to get off. And then she's sort of gone, "Oh, I'm really sorry, love." She went, I think I've give you Roy's. And she was like, "Here you go, Roy." And she just like passed Roy this wage slip that had been like written out. And sort of then she started like fanning through the thing. So I've just been like stood there with my head down, like waiting for my wage slip. But like Keno's not gone anywhere. He's just stood still. He's not walked out. He's just stood and put his arm around me and like waited for me to get my wage slip. I was like, oh no, this isn't going to go well. So Kath's got my wage slip eventually. She's found it, give me it, and said, "Oh, I'm really sorry about that, Roy." She was like, "That's my fault. I can only apologise." She was like, "Oh no, it's okay, Kath. Don't worry about it." So then obviously I've got my wage slip, and as we're walking out, he sort of like just put his arm around me. And as we've walked out the doors, he just sort of he just sort of like leaned across to me and said, "Did you have a look then?" And I was like, I was like stuttering again. I was a bit like, he went, "Go on, you can tell me. Did you have a look?" I said, yeah, I did, but obviously I knew straight away it was yours, so I just brought it back in. And he was like, "Oh no," he said, "it's fine." He said, I'm fine. He said, "It doesn't bother me." He said, this is the perks of the job." He said, "Earning this kind of money doesn't really bother me." He said, "And hopefully one day you'll be earning this kind of money, Marsh." And I was thinking, oh my God, like in my head, I'd sort of envisioned it being completely different, like absolutely going off his head, thinking like, "Why are you looking at my wages?" and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, he was nice as pie, and he was like, "Don't worry about it." He was like, "Hopefully you'll be on this one day. Have a good rest of your day." And I literally walked back to my car, got in my car, and opened my 500 quid wage slip, whatever it was. Obviously, when he'd had like nearly $1 million. But yeah, it was mad because I went and sat in the car then and was thinking like, oh, that could have gone so differently. But yeah,
amazing.
He was great with me, and as I say, I think because of what happened in terms of the car crash, he always had like a little bit of a soft spot for me because he was quite brutal, to be fair, with some of the younger players at that time. Some of the ones who sort of was a little bit flash and was buying like sports cars and coming in the training ground with like, mad designer clothes and stuff like that. I think he didn't like anything like that.
Yeah.
I think because I sort of kept my head down and was just sort of, wasn't anything flashy or anything. I just sort of came in, did my work, kept my head down. I think he liked that about me. And obviously with what happened in the car crash, I think he might have had like a little bit of a soft spot for me with, the way I sort of came back from that and shown the right attitude. So as I say, someone like that to sort of, be able to, speak to him and sort of, have his respect and sort of know that, he thought that he was, a decent lad and a good player was, massive for me because, even though, I didn't have, a long, massive career at United, I was still lucky enough to be there at a time when, you're playing with some of the best players that's ever played the game. I was lucky enough to play with Rooney, Scholes, Ronaldo, Ferdinand, Keane, Giggs, all these players who, are absolute legends in United's history. And, I had really good relationships with all them players and sort of, I've really good memories of them sort of 3, 4, 5 years that I was full time, mixing with them and sort of, sharing the training ground and sort of experiences and going abroad and Christmas nights out and all that kind of stuff. Them kind of things, you'll never forget anything like that. So yeah, it was brilliant times. And as I say, I think it's always sort of bittersweet when I talk about them times because then I think of like obviously the current state that the club's in now, and it's just really sort of disappointing and sort of, sad really that we've sort of fell so far from them, times. I'm not naive enough to think that, clubs don't go through bad spells and that, we can't sort of maintain that forever. But I just think, from where we was to sort of where we are now, it's been a sort of almighty crash.
Yeah, it is such a shame to get to this point. But we've been so spoiled over the years with success, and it was always going to happen. Right, I think we'll move on to a little feature that I like to do. You've probably not seen it before, Phil, but basically every week at around 10 o'clock, I do a top 10 at 10. So every week on the feature, I do a quiz. I'll do the quiz the panel on a random top 10 that I find on the internet. So sometimes we'll do Oscar-winning actors or best-selling artists. But because obviously you're on the show, I want to do something a little bit different. And Keane came up with this idea, and I thought it was fucking brilliant. So we're going to do this. You're going to blind rank 10 Manchester United legends. Okay? So I'm going to give you 10 names, and you're going to give me whereabouts you would put them in a 1 to 10 without knowing who's coming next. Happy with that?
That's fine, yeah. I'll give it.
This is going to be fun. Okay. So, number 1 is Roy Keane. We just spoke about him, but where would you rank him 1 to 10?
I think for me, he's got to be 100% in the top 3. Depending on obviously who comes, I probably wouldn't put him as number 1 just because I think there's probably a couple of other players that might just pip him. So I'm going to go. I'll put him number 3.
Number 3. Wow. Okay. Good start. Right. Number 2 is again another player we've just mentioned, Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah, I think for different reasons, obviously than Keane. I think depending on which way you want to look at it, I think Ronaldo for me, just obviously from a personal point of view in terms of my relationship that I had him whilst I was at the club, performance levels that he's shown while he was at the club in his first spell, especially, was absolutely sensational. And as an attacking player, obviously to learn and sort of watch, some of the stuff that he was doing. For me, he's definitely got to be up there. I think for me, he'd probably be number 1. I think, I think even though, for different reasons, there'd be other players maybe ahead of him in certain aspects. I think for me, and obviously my time at the club, I think he's got to be, the number one, especially as an attacking player, to sort of be able to watch and learn from him, sort of, and what he's done in his career. I think he warrants that position, really.
Excellent. We're going to get into a bit of more interesting names coming up, so these are going to be fun. Next one's Ruud van Nistelrooy.
Wow. Yeah, obviously Ruud was probably my all-time favourite United striker. I think, his finishing ability was absolutely incredible. The way he used to sort of, score goals out of nothing, like in the box, and just his feet and his vision was incredible. And being, lucky enough to do some sort of finishing drills after training and seeing firsthand, how actually good he was. I think he's definitely going to be, in the top 5. I think I'd probably put him at, depending who comes after, I'd probably go safe here and go number 5. Even though, in terms of, for me, he's probably one of my favourite United players of all time. But I obviously respect some of the other players that might get mentioned who have probably done more, if you know what I mean, for like the time. So I'll put him at 5, which is safe. But he probably could be a little bit higher depending on who comes. But obviously, I don't know. So I'll just have to go safe and go 5.
No, I like that. That's good. Next one's quite a good one. Wayne Rooney.
Yeah, see, like Wayne Rooney for me is another one who's up there with Ronaldo. So I'd put him in definitely at number 2. I think what he's done, throughout his career, not just for Man United, for England as well. Absolutely incredible player. Don't think he sort of gets the credit that he probably deserves. And another player, this current day and age, if you go back to a prime Wayne Rooney and sort of, look at what he brought to the table in terms of his aggression in the right way, his attitude, his desire, his work rate, his goals, he had absolutely everything. So, yeah, for me, Wayne Rooney's, got to be, up there, and he's obviously the all-time top scorer as well. So, yeah, he's definitely in the top 3. So I'll have to put him 2 because Ronaldo was 1.
Right. So far you've got Ronaldo 1, Rooney 2, Keno 3, and then you've gone for Ruud in 5th.
Yeah.
Okay. So next one is my favourite all-time midfielder, Paul Scholes.
Yeah, another player again who, people ask me who the best player you've ever played with is, and I always say Ronaldo and Rooney, Ronaldo and Scholes. In terms of, when I think back to some of the training sessions and, some of the things he used to do in training and his vision, and just every time, if you was on Scholes' team in training, you knew that he was winning, because he just used to run the training sessions like it was so hard to get the ball off him. He was always 3 or 4 passes ahead of everybody else. Yeah, absolutely incredible. And for somebody who's so small and didn't really sort of, have that much about him in terms of, he never used to go in the gym, never used to sort of do extra training. He used to be like dead laid back and not really have, a care in the world, it seemed. Obviously he did. And obviously he was an unbelievably talented player, because he wouldn't have done the things that he'd done if he didn't. But yeah, he was just such a natural talent. He was, sensational, and sort of was a massive player alongside Keno in that midfield. I'd probably have to put him at number 4 because in my era as well, he was sort of, along with probably, Gerrard and maybe Lampard, who gets compared the best midfielder that, England's ever produced.
Wow, this is going to get interesting. Trust me. So
yeah, you threw a few curveballs at me here because all these players are sort of from when I was at the club, so I've got a bias towards them as well.
So the next few you've definitely been in the club with. So the next one's the Welsh wizard himself, Ryan Giggs.
Yeah, I think in terms of longevity and obviously, coming into the club at such a young age and sort of playing obviously just for Man United throughout that time, and sort of, being a mainstay in the team sort of all that time has sort of, definitely warranted him being, in the top place that I've got left, which would be number 6. So even though I'd probably, if I could, I'd probably put him maybe a place or 2 higher. I don't think, if I'm being honest, he's probably as better player as maybe some of them players, but I just think because of what he's done for the club and obviously over the years that he's been there, the amount of trophies he's won and sort of, the longevity of the guy is just insane, really. So, yeah, I think Giggs, everybody, understands and realises how much of a massive influence and impact he's had on the club. So, yeah, unfortunately, I have to be number 6 because I think that's the highest place I've got left.
Right, so we'll recap your 1 to 6. Ronaldo number 1, Rooney number 2, Keano number 3, Scholesy 4, Van Nistelrooy number 5, and Giggsy is 6. Okay. Next one is, again, one of my favourite strikers and didn't get very long at the club at all, is Alan Smith. Again, another player that you were with at the club. How good of a player was he when he was like 100% fit?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I love Smithy. I think he obviously played a lot with me in the reserves because injuries, and obviously he couldn't really sort of get a proper run in the first team because of how well he was doing and obviously how much talent they had in their attacking areas. But, he's a great lad. He had a brilliant attitude. He's sort of work rate and his, desire again, which, is massive in terms of, ticking the boxes for what the club were looking for at that time. Yeah, I just think he was a little bit unlucky, really, with sort of his injuries and sort of maybe some of the other players that we had at the club at the time. But yeah, cracking lad, great player. Obviously did really well at Leeds before. Obviously he came to United, and obviously everybody sort of knew what he was about. But scored some really good goals and scored, some, had some big performances. And the thing I liked about Smith was, he would play in any position. If the manager asked him to maybe drop into midfield or, do a job out wide or whatever, he would always do a job for the team, which you need, especially a big club like that when you've got, a lot of games coming thick and fast and you maybe have injured players or, suspensions or whatever. He would always come in, do a job, and sort of, be very reliable and sort of consistent with that. So, yeah, great player, great lad. Just maybe was a little bit unlucky at the time in terms of, why he didn't maybe get more opportunities. But yeah, in terms of where he'd go in my top 10, I think he's depending on who comes. I don't want to be disrespectful to him and maybe put him 10th, but I think maybe just purely based on, because he didn't really play as many games or didn't really sort of get as many opportunities because of the reasons we've just spoke about. I'm going to probably put him number 9.
Number 9? Fair enough.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think number 9 is probably a fair assessment up to now, with obviously where we're at. I mean, I might regret that in a bit if you say some of the players that I'm not too sure on, but we'll see.
So next one is my favourite manager in the last few years is OGS, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. What was he like? Because I think you did a lot of rehab with him as well, didn't you? Sort of coming up.
I honestly, I absolutely love Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and yeah, when I was injured, obviously for that period after my car crash, he'd just done his ACL. So we were sort of, on the treatment table with each other for about 6-8 months of sort of, my rehab. So got really close with him, did a lot of stuff with him, a lot of, rehab and running and sort of stuff in the gym. Really, really, really great guy. Somebody who, for me as a young kid and trying to sort of learn your trade and, pick the bones from people, he was somebody who I always sort of, would ask questions and just, sort of lean on him for any advice and stuff. And he was just a really nice guy, just would always, help you, would always want to sort of offer support. So for me, I think, again, just going off my own personal experiences and sort of, preference really sort of from, what I've seen and what I've sort of been involved in. I'm going to say Ollie goes in at 7. I think obviously scoring the goal in 99 as well obviously has a massive impact on obviously like how the club sort of values and remembers Ollie. But again, going back to what I said about Alan Smith, always had the right attitude. Whether he was starting or whether he was coming on off the bench, that didn't matter. He'd always come on with a point to prove, right attitude. I've sort of the team in the forefront of his mind, and more times than not, he would come on and have an impact on a game of football. He'd score a goal or he'd set a goal up, or he'd make sure for the period of time he was given on the pitch that he would make sure that he had an impact on that game of football. And that's all you can ask for when you've got such a good squad and the competition's so high. For someone like Ollie, he knew his job and he knew his role within the squad, and every time he was asked upon, the manager would know that he was going on and would do something. So again, he's a brilliant person, brilliant player, and yeah, I would definitely put him in at 7 again, just purely based on my experiences with him as well. I think that has a big part to play in that, because as I say, for someone who's sort of learning his trade and coming up through the ranks and being able to sort of learn from someone like that, it's invaluable, really.
Yeah, absolutely. He's just one of my favourite personalities from the last sort of 10 years at United and so on. It was just absolutely brilliant. All right, 2 more players to go and 2 spots left. So the last one is probably someone that you probably shared a training ground with quite a bit. Probably didn't play much with him, but David Beckham.
Yeah,
this one's probably a bit before when you were playing.
Yeah, so it was a little bit. Obviously, I do remember Becks though quite well though, because at the time, obviously, when you're sort of part of the academy, you sort of get given season tickets and you can go and watch the games. And obviously, he was training at the Cliff, and I would see, them train quite a bit. And obviously, he was a massive, player at the time. I remember him scoring the goal at Wimbledon. All that kind of stuff. Again, he's been, such a big player, and obviously what he went on to do afterwards and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I can't not put him in the sort of highest position that I've got left available, because again, I think, the impact that he had on the club and sort of, some of the goals he scored, and he was just a brilliant player. I think, he obviously went on to sort of Real Madrid after he left and sort of kicked on and did really well there after a bit of a struggle to get in the team. But yeah, I think what he's done at United and sort of, coming through with that crop of players that he came through, he has to be, definitely in the sort of conversation to be in the top 10. So I'll have to just put him, was it 8th place?
Yeah, you've got 8th left, yeah.
Yeah. I probably would have higher, but yeah, 8th will do for that.
Yeah, well, I'm going to ask you afterwards if you're changing it, but the last place, and you'll probably actually be quite happy with this, that I've done this, but the last place is you.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, to be fair, that's quite fitting. I think in terms of, I look back on my career at United and sort of think, I was lucky enough to be there for 10 years. I sort of enjoyed every single moment that I was there. There's obviously a few things that I wish would have played out differently, which obviously we've spoke about, but that's life. And obviously I had to deal with that and sort of, use that as sort of fuel to sort of get back to, the level that I was sort of at before that happened. So yeah, I don't have any regrets in terms of, what sort of happened and how everything played out. I just think, sometimes that, and maybe to be fair, sometimes I think if I'd have been at the club, maybe, at a different period, I might have got more opportunities. I might have been given, different, chances and maybe got more of a chance to sort of play games. But on the flip side of that, I'm not complaining. I got a chance to train and play with some of the best players that's ever played the game. So yeah, it's sort of a, weird one, but no, I'm happy to have, been at the club for as long as I was and do some of the stuff that I did. To obviously play in the first team and get that appearance at the time that I was there was sort of, a massive achievement, especially after everything I'd been through and, the work that I'd put in to get back to sort of the level that I needed to be to sort of be in and around that. So, yeah, as I say, unbelievable memories and sort of great times on and off the pitch. I'm happy to slot in at 10th place.
When me and Keane wrote that, we thought, it would be hilarious if he ends up putting himself number one without even realising.
I'm happy to slot in there at 10th place and sort of look down on some of them names that I was lucky enough to sort of watch or sort of like train or play alongside, because, as I say, for a young player to sort of be in that environment and in that sort of bubble to sort of mix with them kind of players was incredible. And as I say, it's different now because I've been back to Carrington a lot over the last sort of couple of years, and the younger players now are in a separate building, so they don't even get the opportunity to sort of mix with some of the first team players, which I think is a massive trick that the club's missing. Because when I was there, you sort of, even though you're only in the youth team or the reserves, if you're sort of mixing with the first team players, you sort of learning from how they do things, you're watching them train, you're speaking to them, you're being able to sort of pick their brains and sort of pick up any little sort of things that might give you that extra little bit of an opportunity to learn and be better. I think that's a massive plus. And I obviously look back at that time and think, all them conversations and times that I spoke with players or, watched them after training, or was lucky enough to be able to, sit and speak to them for half an hour about, things that they might do after training or things they might work on as a striker to get better at a certain part of your game. That kind of stuff is priceless. And for me, that was, and not only that as well, I think another big thing is sort of, because you sort of mixing with them on a day-to-day basis, you feel sort of part of the fabric, and that you're not that far away from maybe, getting a call up or being involved, because, as I say, you're mixing and you're interacting with all these players. And it's not just the players, it's the staff. Obviously the boss, in the canteen will always sort of, speak to you and be, really polite and forthcoming and make you feel welcome. So all them little sort of things that, add up, it sort of, makes you want to be better and want to do more. And sort of, for me, I think that's, the club, I mean, they might have reasons behind it, I don't know. But, for me, I think when I look back at my time, that was, you're excited to go in training every single day, because you're thinking you don't know what's going to happen. You might, end up having a conversation with, for me, like, I might end up having a conversation sat at breakfast with Ruud van Nistelrooy about he's just played in on Saturday, speaking to him about, his goal he scored. And then I go into training then buzzing, thinking, oh yeah, that was class. And he's just given me a bit of, information there about, I'm going to try that in training, or, I'm going to try and practice that when I've got a bit of time to sort of better myself and see if I can, live up to, some of the standards that some of these lads in the first team are producing. Because inevitably that's what you want to get to. You want to try and, marry yourself up with some of the players that are playing in your position. Because I used to love going to the games on the Saturdays or whenever it was, and I used to just watch the players in my position, and I used to just think, right, what I'm going to watch today, Rooney, Van Nistelrooy, whoever it was, and I'm just going to sort of focus on them. Obviously watch the game, but focus a bit more on them. Look at the movements. Where are they? When the ball goes out wide, where are they in relation to the ball? What's when he's how's he holding the ball up and setting it off, and then what's he doing after that? Is he spinning? Is he playing 1-2s? What kind of stuff can I add to my game to make me a better player? To sort of look at where I'm at and sort of see what some of these top class players are doing to sort of try and give yourself that bit of stuff that you can get better at or learn. I used to absolutely love that. And then obviously if you've got the chance then to go and speak to him as well after it, or a couple of days later, then that's just, for me, you can't buy that. That's stuff that you're giving yourself the best chance to sort of improve. And then obviously it's up to yourself then whether you can go away and put the work in and apply that to your game.
No, that's fantastic. No, honestly, just having the opportunity to represent your club and to share dressing rooms with some of the players you've played with, honestly, it's been absolutely brilliant. We're well over time here, Phil, and we haven't even had an opportunity to talk about any of the other stuff I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about your time in non-league and your coaching, like what you've been doing recently. So we will have to do another show, just me and you.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll do this again, and we'll talk all about non-league, because I'm a big non-league, National League fan. My team at the moment, Maidstone United, not doing very well.
No, you follow Maidstone.
Yeah, I'm from Maidstone. Sitting 16th in National League South. We won't go too much into it, but no, honestly, you've been an absolute superstar, Phil. I really appreciate your time, and yeah, we'll definitely have to do this again soon, because you've just been an absolute revelation. And honestly,
I appreciate it, mate. As I say, it's been a while, so been good to get back on and obviously have a chat and catch up. But yeah, I'd be happy to jump on again at some point. And
no, we'll do a non-league special. I promise. We'll do a national league and non-league special. Absolutely. No, brilliant. Right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. We've got a packed shows coming up this week. We've got United Road is back tomorrow with Callum, and he's got a special guest as well. Forgive me, I can't remember who it is. And we've also got a Red Devils roundup this week as well. So keep an eye out on the socials. If you've enjoyed this,